My name is Heather. I had a uncomplicated but very long, arduous labor, and when my daughter was born, she was born very alert and very hungry, and I latched her on my breasts, and I was just so eager to just hold her and be with her that I didn't really think about proper latching on, and nobody really looked over me because it was just we were so glad it was over. I had the 44-hour labor and it was very hard, and when she came off my breast, I had a little blister from a bad latch and the constant sucking, and I didn't think anything of it, and went back home, and the next day the blister opened and started to get very sore and started to ooze, and it was quite uncomfortable. And then every time she nursed on that side again, it would get worse and worse, and the wound kept getting larger and bloodier and uglier. And I had a midwife, and she was very wonderful, and I came to her crying and said, "This hurts so much, what am I going to do?" And my milk had come in, and we were having such a difficult time. I had an oversupply, 4 milk, hind milk imbalance, and she was very colicky and very gassy and having a lot of difficulty. And so she suggested trying a nipple shield just to protect that breast while she nursed. And then she would bring over a comfrey from her garden and make a poultice and a tea that to try and speed up the healing in the times when she wasn't nursing. And that worked okay for a little while, but unfortunately when you use a nipple shield, you don't get the same kind of drainage that you do with a baby on your breast normally. And I started developing plug ducts and eventually got struck with a very high fever and chills and was taken into the hospital. And they said I had a very, very bad breast infection, more than just mastitis. It had spread all the way up my breast underneath and into my underarm. It was very badly inflamed, and I became very, very sick with that. I took antibiotics, which gave us thrush and made her stomach upset, and also masked the symptoms of an abscess that was forming in my breast from plug ducts that hadn't been resolved. And when I got off the antibiotics, the day afterward, this horrible thing came to the surface of my breast that was black and sore and incredibly painful. I couldn't even touch my breast, it hurt so bad. And I called my midwife again in tears, and I had to get taken down to the hospital again for an exam, and they said, "You have to, this abscess is huge, we have to operate on it, and you have to come in to the hospital tomorrow morning under general anesthetic and get it taken out. It's huge." And I'm very afraid of surgery and needles, and it was just a horrible ordeal. I went down to the hospital the next day, and they took it out, and they told me before I went in that it was a simple procedure and that the scar would be non-existent, that it wouldn't affect my breastfeeding in any way, and that I would be in and out and it would be no problem. And none of that was true. They left a gaping hole in my breast that's supposed to drain for months and months and months because of the size of the abscess. It was many inches long and went all the way into my areola, which made it almost impossible to latch my daughter onto that breast. And it was very painful. I had to change the bandage every time she nursed. She would grab at it and rip it off, and she couldn't latch on anyway because the bandage would have to be almost inside her mouth. It would bleed, and it was so painful and awful. I hated it. I was so discouraged about breastfeeding. By the time she was about 5 or 6 months old, most of the problems that we were having with adjusting had gone down, but my milk supply on that side never did catch up. It mostly became a finishing off breast. It was permanently damaged. The size of the scar was huge, and while initially I was offered this cosmetic procedure, my doctor said, when it's all healed up, I can do surgery where we, essentially take out the scar tissue and just make a tiny little mark instead of this gigantic scar that I have that's almost the size of my thumb. And at that time, I jumped at the opportunity to have that kind of thing happen and hide it because it was embarrassing and I hated it, and people would point it out to me and think that my nipple was showing because it was so large and strange sticking out. But by the end of it all, it really felt like I was proud of it because it represented so much struggle that we'd gone through.
Oh wow, yeah.
She did end up nursing all the way through until she self-weaned at 34 months, and my milk supply on that breast, it was funny, never actually caught up until I had him. some years later, and he started preferring that side, which just cannot keep up with it because of the nerve damage. It takes longer to fill, it takes more stimulation to get the same amount, and he wouldn't nurse on the good breast. And all of a sudden I started what I've later learned is called recanalizing, regrowing milk ducts. And because there's so much scar tissue on one side of my breast, they can't grow there, so they all started coming up around the outside of my areola on the other side. So I've literally grown the ability to nurse on that side again, but it took years. We've gone through so much, and I feel really proud to still be breastfeeding and to still be doing this, and to feel like, you know, that even after going through all of these terrible things, it can be done. And, you know, in the middle of it all, you really feel like losing hope, but at the same time, it's like, why throw away all the struggle that you just had?